World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity. This is Clarity.
Starting the show with a bit of a different front tonight. It's 6 o'clock on Saturday night. Kervin, Julien with issues today, going live across to the United States of America. Joined tonight by my regular co-host, Dr. David Remay. We've got Charlie Grabsky with us again tonight. And we are Legion. We also have with us our guest, Anonymous Outlaw, representing.
Victory is all you need, so cultivate and plant the seed. Hold your breath and count to 10, just count to 10. I'm gonna make it rain, so ring the bell. I know it all too well. Switchblade on the edge of your wrist, can I get a witness? 'Cause agony brings no reward for one more hit and one last score. Don't be a casualty, cut the cord. Cut the cord. You gotta feel courage, embrace possession. If it was easier to shatter everything you ever mattered, but it's not because
Trust me, you better fasten up your seatbelts,
you're a fighter.
because this ride is about to get rough. We're talking about police brutality.
Complicated in its name, but we
We're talking about abuse of power.
really inspire.
We're talking about corruption.
Victory is all
We're talking about murder.
cultivate and plant the seed.
We're talking about the restriction of your basic human rights.
Just I'm gonna make it rain, so ring the bell. I know it all too well. Switchblade on the edge of your wrist, can I get a witness? 'Cause agony
This is Issues Today. World Jam Global Radio.
lasts for
Worldwide, international, universal,
time.
fighting the fight that needs to be fought.
World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity.
Cause victory is all you need, so cultivate and plant the seed. Hold your breath and count.
It's time for action. Time for words to be spoken. Time for things to be said. Time for things to be heard.
Switchblade on the edge of your wrist, can I get a witness?
Coming to you live.
'Cause agony brings no reward for one more hit and one last score. Don't be a casualty, cut the cord.
Going out to the people of the universe. This is your world.
Casualty, cut the
And we're going to talk about the things that are happening in it. I wonder, was this what you bargained for? Hashtag Black Lives Matter.
World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity. This is Clarity.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're going to be pulling no punches. We're going to be talking to Dr. David Remay. We're going to be talking to Charlie Grabsky. We're going to be talking to the Anonymous Outlaw. But first, let me introduce my regular co-host and riding shotgun once again, as ever, is the irrepressible Dr. David Remay. Good evening, David.
Good afternoon from Connecticut, USA, Kervin, and our wonderful guest, Anonymous and Charlie. The sun is shining here. I'm looking out my window. The ocean is glistening like diamonds, and there's a huge number of sail ships sailing into the river from the ocean in a large regatta. A beautiful scene that contrasts very sadly with the political life in the United States of America. What's new in our part of the world? Well, let me begin by talking about the Iran deal that President Obama achieved with great victory this week over a Congress completely sold out in the majority to the American Israel Political Action Committee, many Jewish organizations, and the secret organizations funded by the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu to persuade the foreign policy of the United States to be the hind leg of a mighty Israel instead of Israel, the colony of the United States of America. And it reminds me, when I was a professor of leadership and medicine at the university, I gave a course once to my young medical students on lying. And the entire course was about the 7 types of liars, deceit, and other types of that kind of immoral and criminal activity. And I asked the students to make sure they're in the right course on the first day. And I said, are all of you in the right course? And they said, yes. I then asked them, had all of them read chapter 25 of the textbook? And they all said yes. And then I was certain they were in the right class, because just like Congress, there is no chapter 25, and they're all liars. Now, the next level here is Russia is moving into Syria. Why? Because Netanyahu wants to preserve the government of Syria under Assad at all cost. As long as Assad, the dictator over Syria, is in charge, Israel can continue without any kind of negative results to occupy the Golan Heights illegally and steal the water, and now drilling for oil in Syrian property and taking from what belongs to millions and millions of Syrian citizens who are now refugees all over the world, that which is rightfully theirs. We must find a solution to Syria, and it is on the conscience of every American, equal to Rwanda if we don't do it. Trump and Ben Carson have entered into a fight in America. Ben Carson, the Republican child neurosurgeon, pediatric neurosurgeon, has become holier than thou, and the Republican black American is now questioning the religious tenacity of Donald Trump, as if religion has any role whatsoever in the political battles that are waged in the United States. So they've gone at it, and he has accused Trump of not always being a Republican, and Trump is accusing him of having once supported abortion. But no member of the United States media, unlike Kervin and me and World Jam Radio, have asked Ben Carson, the Uncle Tom hypocrite Republican who forgot from where he came and cares less about African Americans in this country. None have ever asked him the question. And the one question to ask this holier than thou Ben Carson is, have you ever in any way consulted or contributed to an abortion? And if you have, tell us so. Don't let him off the hook. Finally, as I warned, and my good friend Kervin supported me in this warning, Freddie Gray's murder in Baltimore by a police gang has now cost the city $6.4 million. And that is exactly the reason, as I have often said, the police will not admit to their crimes of murder and abuse, because it cost their white warlords and political leaders a lot of money. And if we continue to attack along the civil level and make these cities and their elected white rulers pay up a fair share, or at least a modest share, of millions and millions of dollars for every life they take, we will hit them in the pocketbook. And as the U.S. government has proved with terrorists all over the world and defendants in our own country, the first place you attack is their pocketbook, and then they fall. So that is it from the United States of America today.
Amen. Thank you very much, Dr. David Remay. And what an absolutely fantastic roundup of the current events that are taking place in America. That should be enough to turn the hearts and minds of those of you who sit on the fence wondering whether you go left, right, or straight ahead. Along with me tonight we also have, you cannot fault him. He was an absolutely tremendous guest last week, fighting for the life of his father and the rights of others on many fronts. We also have Charlie Grabsky. Good evening, Charlie.
Good evening.
And you're sounding positively clear, my friend. And how are you this evening?
I'm doing okay, given everything going on in my life.
Okay, I hope to hear that your father is not too bad at the moment. Is he okay?
He's doing wonderful. He's getting better every day, and they're taking good care of him now, finally.
I know, and as we had conversations throughout the week, there was particular procedures that had to take place, which caused some complications. But he's on the up and up now, and everything seems to be as it should be, right?
Yes. Yes.
Once again, we hold him up in prayer, and we just hope that everything turns out the way that it's supposed to. Alongside Charlie tonight, before I do the real introduction of what this show entails, we also have with us once again, and he was an absolutely fantastic guest just 2 weeks ago, and he was desperate to come back. And in fact, I am going to introduce it now before I bring him on, because the reason why we did this show was I had a message from the Anonymous Outlaw telling me that a particular person had been pulled in, and had he had not had them tracked and watched, etc., the fear was that person might have been gone, disappeared forever. Fortunately, that was not the case. They were located, but not without duress and problems. And the case, as we're going to hear it tonight, is so problematic in its entirety, ludicrous beyond ridiculous, that by the time we finish with this show, Outlaw is not going to just be asking me or David or Charlie, what do we think? You're going to be asking yourselves, how on earth does this happen in a free country, supposedly like the United States of America? Good evening, Anonymous Outlaw.
Good evening.
And how are we this evening, sir?
Alive.
Okay, alive, and that's a good place to start. And most importantly, the person that we're referring to is safe at the moment, as far as we know. They're safe and well.
Yes.
And out of harm's way, just for now at least.
Yes.
And just to warn you or everybody that's listening tonight, we will be making a request via a particular GoFundMe account for people to sponsor, donate, contribute as little as they can in order for us to get this particular person to a place of safety. Their life as it is at the moment is in jeopardy. They have been threatened because of what they've uncovered, and we need to get them safe. I cannot emphasize that enough, and we will re-emphasize this throughout the show. But just after the show that we did with Outlaw 2 weeks ago, a particular situation occurred where a particular activist was arrested, was pulled over and arrested. And I'm going to introduce Charlie Grapsky now to tell us and detail for us as best as he can. And I am fully aware that Charlie has been in communication with the individual and is up to date and is up to speed with the story thus far. So, Charlie, take us through the initial events. What actually happened? What took place?
Well, yeah. I mean, first, let me explain how I came to find out about this. Is that a person who had been very active in helping me out in getting the word out that I had been arrested and in trouble and needed help. I was contacted and said, she was arrested yesterday. And then, I got concerned, and then I was given some of the details of the arrest, and it just didn't add up. It made no sense at all. I was told that she was arrested. She was just driving down the street, that they never took a photograph. They never did, a number of things in the jail. And it was just complete and utter confusion. Also just happens that because I'm where my father is right now, I'm not far away from where she was arrested and where she is. So I was able to meet with her personally, see the site, see the where the incidents are taking place, where the arrest took place. And I spent several hours with her, both counseling her on the trauma that she went through, as well as trying to piece together the puzzle. So this is what I've been able to find out from both talking to her and getting the documents and reviewing the documents. She lives in an area that should be very nice and peaceful, but there's a neighbor with a very serious problem of, this is a drug center of trade. And she's a person who has been a citizen journalist, documenting this, trying to get action on it, trying to get the issue resolved. And she left her home in her truck to drive down the street about a week and a half ago, just to see what was going on. And as she got onto the main street, now you got to understand this is a 2-lane road. One lane goes east, the other goes west. There's no second lane for you to turn into, or there's one lane if you're going east and one lane if you're going west. And she drove past a large collection of police vehicles, and with her cell phone, she videoed that as she drove past. As she went further down the road, all of a sudden, she was being trailed by an unmarked car. And that car at one point put on what appeared to be lights, signaling her to pull over. She pulled over on the side of the road, was very concerned because she hadn't done anything illegal. And this unmarked vehicle then proceeds to just sit behind her. The officer does not get out of the vehicle and come approach her window, ask her, both give the identity of the officer and ask for her license and registration, which is normal at a traffic stop. Instead, the car just remains parked behind her for a long period of time before anything else happens. And she contacted a friend via phone to say, this is what's going on. I'm afraid. I don't know what to do. So eventually she did exactly what you're supposed to do when you are afraid and you're concerned and you don't know where to turn. She called the emergency number in America is 911. You're not required to know the local police phone number by heart, but if you're in trouble, you call 911. And of course, England has its own version of that, different numbers, but the same concept.
Absolutely.
And so while she's on the phone with 911 explaining that there's this unmarked vehicle pulled, doesn't know why it's pulled over on the side of the road, that she's sitting there, that nobody's, come up to her and talk to her, a number of other police vehicles now begin arriving at the scene. From more than one agency, from what I'm told, not just from one single agency, and they're milling around behind the back of her vehicle. Again, not approaching her. They're looking at her license plate. They're looking at her truck. They got their hands on their guns. Today police are dressed almost in paramilitary, uniform. They're pretty frightening to see on the street, even in traffic stops. And so she's on the phone with 911 saying, I don't know what's going on. I'm concerned. And eventually, a large female officer, not on the driver's side, but from the passenger side, bangs on her window and starts barking commands at her, including, open your window. And she's on the phone with 911 at the time, and she's afraid. And she says, "I'm afraid. I'm afraid to do this. I'm afraid to open the window." And they begin this is exactly like with Sandra Bland and numerous other cases we've seen. So the police begin for nothing but a mere traffic stop that she still doesn't know what she's done. They're we'll smash your window in, which is just that's excessive force.
That's ludicrous
for a traffic stop. And so eventually she complies, very much out of fear, and they're telling her, demanding that she hang up with 911, but she gets out of the car and she's questioned, and some strange things start happening. Like this initial officer removed from her the dog tags that her father wore in Vietnam that she wears around her neck now. I mean, physically took them off of her and took possession of her. And this is just completely, inexplicable why that would happen. They eventually, the first thing that she's told when she's told why she was stopped, it was because they said that they saw her filming them when she drove by, which of course is not illegal. The next thing they tell her is that she changed lanes without, using her blinker. Then it became that her brake light was out. And then what we see in the actual police report, in the arrest report, it actually states that the reason they did this traffic stop was because of a tint violation, a window tint violation, then failure to maintain a single lane, and failure to utilize left turn signal. I mean, well, the tint one right away from the start should send up red flags. We're talking about 6 o'clock in the evening, driving down a road, and you're telling me that a police officer can tell that the tint on someone's window is too dark for the legal limitations, and it's a factory installed tint, and they never did any testing to see if it was an illegal tint. And of course, they never mentioned this to her when she was stopped on the side of the road. They placed her in the back of one of the other vehicles, a Hillsborough County Sheriff's vehicle, and they just leave her there, again, without the dog tags. And the arrest takes more than an hour to complete. And you have to understand, this is a woman who has PTSD from a very severe accident that nearly cost her life, exacerbated by things that had been taking place next door, where she was even attacked by one person with a hammer and hit in the head with a hammer. And so she's scared, and she's undergoing, panic attacks. And they're just ignoring all this. I mean, the most they can do is the one officer is very hostile with her, making all sorts of accusations. Another officer comes and says to her, well, why would you be afraid of the police? You're not black, as if people don't have reason to be fearful of police these days.
There's a bold statement I want to come back to later on.
Sure. And then when they finally do drive her to the jail, that officer, who was not the really offensive one, but another one, she complains to her the whole way that you're making me miss my time off with my kids, and you're doing this. Well, I mean, as if she's to blame. But the big thing,
what you're saying is the officer was accusing the defendant of spoiling her free time. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yes.
I just want the audience to get that properly.
But the arresting charge is literally misuse of 911.
Right, stop there. So you're telling me everything that have been described as the reasons for her A, being pulled over, B, being detained, and C, being taken to the police station does not appear on the charge sheet at all?
Well, it just says that that because she was on the phone with 911 when police officer assumes that you're never afraid, there's no emergency if it's the police, so you have no right to call 911. That they say the arrest report says defendant was advised numerous times throughout the encounter that she was misusing the 911 system, and she failed to conclude a communication with the dispatchers when no emergency existed upon lawful order. So they arrested her for that. But this is not what that law is meant for. This is for, some kid making a prank call, saying, there's a fire in the house next door and there's a baby in the upstairs and nobody can get them. And then the entire fire department and the police department are called out and get there and nothing's on fire. That's what this statute is for. That's what's criminal. Okay. Calling because you have a sincere fear of police is not a criminal act, and it is not unreasonable in this day and age especially, and in the context of what we have seen in the last few months throughout the country, for someone who has done nothing but drive down the road and then gets put into this very odd situation where the police aren't even acting normal for a traffic stop, for them to be fearful. And to call 911 is simply not an abuse.
Okay, let me stop you there. David, I am quite sure you probably have a plethora of questions based on what you've heard so far.
Well, Charlie, first I want to say this is horrendous. But first, I'd just like to clarify one thing. In the state of Florida, every state in America has its own laws about driving. That's a state matter, not a federal matter. In the state of Connecticut, where I live, it is illegal to be driving a vehicle and operating any type of device like a cell phone, a camera, a film, anything that you can use to film, photograph, internet. You're not allowed to use that device if it's handheld while operating a motor vehicle. And in my state, it's a $300 fine for the first offense. So if she was filming the police, that is not a crime unless she was operating or sitting behind the steering wheel of a vehicle capable of the same law in Florida, or are you allowed to use cell phones while driving?
Yeah, in Florida, there is no similar law to that. The texting and driving law that's specific to texting. But no, you can be on your cell phone. You can be holding your cell phone. You can be using a cell phone for, you can be holding it to the side of the window like she was, filming as she kept her eyes on the road.
Are you allowed to speak on the telephone while driving a vehicle in Florida?
Yes.
My God. And you have all those octogenarians and old folks down there who can't drive anyway, and now they're driving with I'm going to stay in Connecticut. Okay, next.
And then, of course, the key thing is that they don't charge her with anything like that. Even if there was such a law, that's not what they charge. But no, there is no such prohibition.
Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to clarify. The second is like, remember, Kervin, the show we had with the boy and the circumcision? We didn't know if he was Jewish later, and he wasn't. Okay, so the next thing is she failed to obey an officer when she directed her to get off the telephone with 911. Is that what she was charged with, or was she charged with abusing 911? Because, and I asked that very specifically, because it seems to me, and I always play devil's advocate, it seems to me that if the officer said, I am an officer, and identifies himself, and then orders her to get off the phone, he has a right under most laws to do that. I mean, otherwise anybody who's going to be arrested would say, leave me alone till I finish my phone call. I mean, nobody can do that. But if he arrested her for failure to obey a lawful order, that is very different than saying that she was arrested because she was abusing. Because it seems to me a policeman does not know the level of anxiety and fear, and a person he's about to arrest, he can only speculate. And her level of fear is what counts in a matter of court, not his view of her level of fear. So could you answer that question?
Sure, and you're correct on that last part about it was her subjective feeling of fear, which ironically, police are using that same standard to justify murder. They say, well, I personally felt fearful, even though any rational person wouldn't have felt fearful for their lives, and they're shooting people in the back who are unarmed.
Excellent point. You stop a guy for a traffic violation, he's running away from you, and you shoot him dead because you're afraid. What are you afraid of? He's going to get away? Go ahead.
Right. But there is the law in Florida.
So why did he arrest her? For failure to obey a lawful order, or for using 911?
The charge is misuse of 911. Now, you can see in the written report how they might have been. See, they often add a charge of resisting arrest, and that's the charge that, even though it doesn't really mean resisting arrest, it means failure to obey a lawful order. Now, of course, it would be a question as to whether it's a lawful order for a police officer to order someone to end a 911 call, but they do charge her with that. They charge her solely with misuse of 911.
Right. So, for me, irrespective of everything else.
Wait one second, Kervin.
Go on.
Did she ever offer any resistance whatsoever, physical or verbal?
No.
Okay, that's good. Move ahead, Kervin. I apologize.
Well, that's fine. You see, now, here we have, right, the scenario painted out for you as best as Charlie can, with the information that's been provided for him, A, by the person in question, and B, by the reports that he's received on his charge sheets, which I've also had the privilege of seeing myself, and can verify that what Charlie says is absolutely correct. That's what she was charged with. The only thing she was charged with was misuse of 911. Now, irrespective of some of the criterias that you put in there, David, as to the policeman's rights to ask her to stop that because he's now present and she no longer needs to be on the phone. I still feel when you take the circumstance as it was, the length of time it took for anybody to approach her, the fact that she was pulled over and people were parked up beside her, then all these vehicles started to arrive from nowhere. If that was me, if that was you, if that was anybody else, the first emotion you would feel would be fear. Now,
I don't think so. First emotion I'd have is I need to go to the bathroom.
well,
that's an autonomic response to fear.
Yeah,
my stomach would be really turning like butterflies and dancing the Tchaikovsky.
Absolutely. And so, therefore, at that point, any sane person would have called for help. And in cases, who's the first person that we don't call the Ghostbusters, right? You call 911. Right? That's the first call that you'd make. Now, I don't know how it works out there, but I'd have imagined you're on the line to 911 talking about this. Somebody else is going to be on the line talking to officers that are in that vicinity saying, we've got a caller on the line here who's claiming that they're being harassed or they're being surrounded or being attacked. And somebody's supposed to come back on the other side. It's okay, we're here. Tell her that she can put down the phone. So was that not something? Is that not something that takes place? Am I imagining something? Am I making this up? What?
Well, what we don't have right now is the 911 recording. But I'm certain that the 911 operator would have been trying to keep her calm and say it's okay. At some point they might have said, yes, we verified that there are police there. There may have been confusion. The 911 operator may not have known what to do. But even it's that process of communicating to the person that it's okay. Someone knows who where you're at, who you are, what's going on. These people are not rogue officers. I mean, people forget. If you're driving down a country highway in the U.S. and all of a sudden a car in the dark appears behind you with what appear to be police lights, you can keep driving without pulling over until you find a public space like a gas station and pull into the gas station and not be charged with evading the officer or engaging in a chase, because it is deemed perfectly reasonable to be worried. People impersonate police officers and make traffic stops and then do harm to persons. There are rogue officers out there, and we certainly have seen, very well documented in the past year with the advent of cameras and cell phone cameras and all of that, how police often abuse their position and worse, how they're already dressed to intimidate. They're no longer in their own world view out there to serve and protect. Everybody's a potential bad guy to them. They're wearing body armor. They have numerous weapons on them. It's not irrational to be afraid in that situation when you haven't done anything wrong.
Okay, so now
I'm wrong, Charlie, but didn't the young journalist state that before the officers even approached her, they gathered at the back of her vehicle with their hands on their weapons, and there was at least 4 of them?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was 15 to 20 minutes before anybody actually approached her and identified themselves. But they were milling around behind her vehicle, hands on weapons, talking to each other, looking at her and her vehicle suspiciously. In fact, one of the really abusive officer, they searched her vehicle. Now, what if the charge is a misuse of 911? What are you searching the vehicle for? And in the vehicle, they found 2 things, not irrational to be in a truck. They found a pocket knife, unopened, that wasn't in her hand at the time, and they found a hammer, by the way, which was the hammer that was used to assault her. When the person, the meth addict from next door came and hit her in the head with the hammer. And so she had it in the truck. But so the police officer says to her, well, I'm afraid of you. You had now, of course, the police officer didn't know that in advance. But this is this game that the police are playing. Well, they could have had this and they could have had that. So we have to be afraid of everybody. But you can see this pattern.
Absolutely, and that paints the picture, taking us to a particular point. And I want to bring Outlaw in, and David, I really want you to pay some.
Well, let me jump one. What do you think is the motivation of these police officers to have targeted her in the first place?
David, we're coming to that right now.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly where we're going to take it to, and we're going to bring it. We're going to bring Outlaw to explain the reasons why. Because for me,
can I say that I have a feeling it has something to do with drugs.
Right. So the bottom line is, right, because so far we've painted the picture and some correct questions have been asked. And David, I knew you'd be perfect for this because your prosecutorial expertise will see through all of that and ask all the correct questions. So here we have a situation where now Charlie has explained the process that took place, to the arrest, to the charge, and everything that went in that. But let's go back to the reason why she dialed 911. Why would she? See, don't forget, we were talking a while ago about how the police always say, well, I shot this guy because I was in fear for my life. And if you remember, David, there was one show where we particularly asked the question, where did that fear come from? What is that fear born from? Then what triggers that fear in that police officer that makes him so fearful of this person that's in front of him that he's going to fire the gun? So now let's ask the question. What could this individual who dialed 911 could have been in such a fear of, right, that she would have been compelled to make that call and hold on to it for dear life until she was absolutely sure that she was safe? Now, Outlaw, you are aware of the work that this particular person was working on and the information that was coming from that, aren't you?
Yes, one of the first questions I had was what she had been working on, because due to Senator Bland's activism and other journalists targeted or intimidated and quiet, I wanted to know what she was working on to see if there was maybe she was targeted as a form of intimidation.
Okay.
And it turned out for the last 2 years, she's been doing her own investigatory. She's been doing her own investigation to write about what's happening next door, because she's tried everything that she can think of legally to get it shut down. They manufacture methamphetamines and distribute out of it. They run a prostitution ring out of there, and she's got documentation of who comes and who goes, what they do, what role they play, and she found out that some of them are actually informants to police officers, and that's why they're able to operate with impunity.
Wow. Okay.
Well, okay, now that I want to follow up there, because
come on, Dave.
The first clue I had, I guess my radar went off when Charlie brought up the hammer of the meth addict next door, because I'm thinking she has probably made complaints and has looked into that matter. And if they're dealing meth in Hillsborough County, Florida, which is a high meth and drug area among the minorities in Tampa, Florida, it seems to me that the police are probably getting kickbacks from them. This is speculation. Probably getting kickbacks, probably have a very good sweetheart financial deal with them, and probably using them as informants, and the police are giving them protection. And she's come in and become what we call in Yiddish a Baklöfe, a cooking spoon. She's stirring the pot and making the bees fly around, and they decided to sting the living hell out of her and put the fear of God in her. That's what I would speculate to. Is that what you're saying, Anonymous?
Yes, actually. She's uncovered some more information since her arrest that confirms my beliefs that this was a targeted intimidation tactic, and they're trying to take her livelihood from her. She makes a living as an independent journalist selling what articles or photos she's able to take to whoever's interested in her story or whatever she's investigating, and that's how she makes a living. And one of the things that they took away from her during this, they impounded her vehicle, they took away her camera, they took away her phone. She didn't get her house keys back even. And that sends up all kinds of red flags of they don't want her to be able to leave her house so she can't do any more. She can't work.
You know, there are some serious implications to what
literally
member
do
of the
nothing.
press, or is she is she an accredited member of the press, or is she just a freelance journalist without any credentials?
She her press pass on her keychain, and she reports. As far as I know, she sends almost all of her stuff into Cop Block. I don't know if you've heard of them or for them, but she does most of her work for them first, but she's not exclusive to them.
But is she an accredited journalist? Because an accredited journalist has certain rights that we, the normal people, don't have. I mean, they are coming under freedom of the press. And so that would be a situation where Charlie, as an activist, should certainly contact the American Journalist Association and inform them that a member of the press, credited and credentialed, has been arrested by the police for doing undercover reporting.
Well, this is what I can add to that. In the past, she has written for what the mainstream world would call the credible press, and what she's doing predominantly now is what we would call citizen journalism. So she's been in both worlds. However, in Florida, it's been recognized that citizen journalists have the same rights as so-called accredited journalists.
Yeah, but you know, the problem there, Charlie, is that if I work for the Washington Post and you come and harass me, the entire news organization and company are going to go after you. But if you work for yourself and you just assert you have this right, well, it's like somebody owes me money. The debt is only as good to me as my ability to collect it.
That's correct, but that's also what makes this story reflective of a much larger problem that's going around the country, especially as the police are feeling the heat of what's being revealed, primarily not from the mainstream press, but by citizen journalists who have forced the mainstream press to start reporting about this rampant wave of police abuse of force and killings that actually has been going on under the radar screen for the past 10, 15 years and only getting exponentially worse. And now as you hear the police PR machine up, well, now there's a war on cops and all of this. There have been very explicit targetings of these citizen journalists. We know. I mean, I was targeted when I was going to go to Ferguson and Albuquerque by groups on the internet. A number of other people that I know that are very notorious for doing filming of police have been arrested in the last couple months, and this sort of fits right in to that pattern that we're seeing more and more every week.
Okay, now I have a really important question here. Not that the other questions I ask are not important, but this is really to the point. Outlaw, this is for you, and Charlie, it's also for you. Outlaw theoretically and you practically. Let me ask this question. As the police now see the danger they encounter as a result of citizen journalists and activists reporting on their criminal behavior through the mass media on the internet, over which they have no corporate control, and as they react to that by shutting it down, harassing and even killing people doing this, what is going to be the result? And I ask that in light of the fact that just in the last couple of weeks we have seen numerous police shootings all over America by citizens shooting police, walking up and just shooting them dead. Is this a natural reaction? Is this a revolutionary action? What kind of a response is it, knowing that the citizens have now taken in their own hands a reaction to the police suppressing what they considered their freedom? What's going to happen in America with all of this? I mean, police are being shot daily now. Where's this leading to, Anonymous?
All right. Statistically, police deaths in America right now are actually at an all-time low. So I don't know where this war on cops thing coming. A few isolated incidents where somebody walks up and shoots a cop because they're mad that police officers are infringing on someone's rights, or they feel like they're a bully. Maybe it was somebody from their past that the officer in question may have affronted them or their family or one of their friends. But that's not being looked into. What's being looked into is the fact that they can connect this to, let's say, the Black Lives Matter movement, to try to discredit it, to help keep division within the people rising up and standing up and saying, hey, this is not okay. And believe it or not, with our prison industrial complex and the way that the police officers insert themselves in the criminal activity, not only to do an investigation, but to keep it going so that they can guarantee their job security, there's a lot to be said that they're manufacturing criminals. They're taking people who are ordinary citizens and they're getting them hemmed up on something that they don't know anything about. And they turn them out and they use them and they use them and they use them until they either die, commit suicide, or eventually just say, screw it, I'm going to go ahead and sit in jail. That's the option that are left to citizens once you come onto a police officer's radar anymore.
You know, here's the thing for me. Killing of innocent people, no matter who it is, no matter where it's done, is wrong on any level. The fact that you're now stating that there are people walking around the streets of America, walking up to police point blank and shooting them dead, doesn't necessarily mean that this is a reaction to some of the protests that are going out there, based on some of the incidents that are taking place that we're talking about through Black Lives Matter or Sandy Still Speaks or anything else. Anonymous Outlaw is quite right in suggesting this may well be one or two isolated personal incidents, and if it does decide to continue, then I'm quite sure that most of the organizations that do not want to be associated with that kind of reaction are going to distance themselves from it, and hopefully take action to discipline or pull in line.
I think the key issue is that Outlaw has said they're using these isolated incidences to publicize them widely to make it look like a major crisis in America when actually police victims are a historical low, and they're using it, and this is the key point I think we have to take from what Outlaw just said, is they're using it to discredit the legitimate Black Lives Movement and those associated with it.
Absolutely.
Well, and I'd add a few things. And first of all, absolutely, it is without a doubt empirically provable that the number of police officers' lives that are taken, unnecessarily and unjustly, and it's a terrible thing, is minuscule compared to the number of, and I'm not even talking about the number of abuses of police force, which don't have to lead to death, which is staggering, but the number of deaths alone caused by police. We're talking numbers. I think this year already we're in the 500s, or just in the last couple of months, 500, 600. People who are presumed innocent to begin with. And what we know from FBI investigations into certain departments is that, for example, like Albuquerque, which has the worst record per capita, and they took a 15-year study of the police deaths, and the FBI concluded that more than 50% of them were unconstitutional. Well, which means that they were acts of murder. And yet not until now, right now, Albuquerque are ever on trial for murder. But in the history of Albuquerque, this has never happened before. And so the other point is that if we look to history, when the police become lawless and they begin using their authority, abusing their authority, it's inevitable. At some point, the people are going to get fed up with it, and there's going to be a backlash. And some of the population in that backlash are going to take it to the extreme. Now, that's not meaning that it's justified to take it to that extreme, but the blame there is not on the people who are legitimately and peacefully trying to expose the problem, who are the main target of the police retaliation. But the problem is the abuse of power that's become the norm and has become normalized in the system, both legal and judicial processes. The police and the judges and the prosecutors have all legitimized this abuse of force and this wide discretion of police and this militarization. When you start having a military force as your domestic police force, eventually the people are going to rise up and stand up against it. That's history. But it's true. It's an absolute exaggeration that there's a war on cops and that somehow the police are in danger and are being targeted in some grand conspiracy. But it's not untrue to say that hundreds of people are dying each year at the hands of police who are not held accountable under the law, and hundreds of thousands are being victims of abuse of force that don't lead to death, but often to serious injury and harm and significant harm.
And to the point where this particular journalist who was working on a particular case that was going on right next door to her, then found out that there were missing bodies turned up who were killed, and it's been said by a particular witness who she has spoken to died at the hands of local officers where the bodies were found on the officers' ranch. Take us into that, please, Outlaw.
Yeah, the Collins Ranch. There's a lady named Donna. She disappeared, and her body was found in a lake that just so happened to come across this ranch, and there was no investigation. They ruled it. It's a cold case at this point. They don't know what happened supposedly. Okay, but the talk around the undercurrent talk, the stuff that the media doesn't get to know and they can't print because there's no proof of it, is that this officer had this woman killed and another individual a couple of weeks later to set an example for people to keep their mouth closed, to not talk about what's going on.
And is it also true to say that the informant I have seen the video, and I know you've seen it, where the informant actually reveals on tape who the murderer was?
Yes, he does. And we are looking into that, actually.
And does he or does he not name the police officer as an involvement in the murder?
Oh, yeah, he definitely does. And since then, this particular officer is no longer part of the picture, but there's another member. There's another officer, Jack Thomas. I'm gonna have to look it up, but he's picking up right where he left off, and he's brutalizing the neighborhood. He's threatening people left and right, and he's actually who has threatened the journalist to cut her head off.
And so there you have somebody who's doing a story. She's a journalist. She's doing a story, which initially starts off with people frequenting a building very close to her, not being touched, and she gets to find out this stuff about people going missing, people dying, nothing being done about it at the hands of police, and she has this as recorded evidence, and now she's been stopped, right, by the very crew related to the office of these people that she's referring to. Am I along the right lines without trying to give away too much?
Yeah, she's been denied restraining orders against the people next door. She's done everything she can possibly think of to protect herself and to get somebody to actually look into what's going on next door to hopefully get it shut down and people arrested and held accountable for breaking the law, except the police are so entangled in it that they can't shut it down.
And here lies the problem, Because had the police not been so entangled in this issue, and as a journalist you'd have taken this to the authorities, somebody would have necessarily been jumping on this, right, and trying to get something resolved from this, because there is sufficient information, allegations, right, and testimony given, right, that will take them to some leads that could possibly get them some answers and some closure on this particular case if they so wished. Correct?
Correct.
So, as a journalist, David, let me ask you the question. If I mean, you're not a journalist, you know, but that's
actually I am a credentialed journalist.
Okay.
Okay.
As a credentialed journalist, had you been party to this information, right? Had you been, because don't forget, you go with your gut instinct, don't you? You see something taking place, it intrigues you, you look at it, and all of a sudden it starts to open up and unravel, and it becomes more. So if you hang on myself, I've got a story here, so you start to document it. And as you start to document it, this thing that you just saw, right, begins to grow into such a thing, you're thinking to yourself, wow, this ain't just any story, this is a massive story, this is a big thing here, right? As your gut instinct, what are you supposed to do with it?
Well, it seems to me, I wouldn't say it's a massive story. I would let it unfold as it unfolds. But I would be cautious. I would bring other people in, and I would certainly, reporter, you get a guardian angel, so to speak. So you go to the commissioner of police or to the mayor or somebody you trust, an attorney, or a local judge, and you say, I'm working in confidence on this story. I feel that my life could be in danger because there are some crooked cops involved or so-and-so is involved. And then they know that person knows, and they have to be very, very careful on how they move now. She obviously did not do this. As a result, the police were free to do anything they wanted to her. Had she been a credentialed journalist or working for a major company and not out on her own, and by the way, I think she is a very, very brave, and these are the kind of people who are the pioneers of America as we move forward. I'm not judging her. I'm just saying you have to have protection because, believe me, even a good cop, let's take a journalist out of the field for the moment. Even if you're a good cop and you're trying to do the right thing and you see terrible corruption, murder, drugs in your department, if those other police get wind that you are going to do something about it, you're dead. You're going to die in the line of duty, and they're going to bury you as a great hero, and they're all going to cry at your grave, but it's going to be their bullet that put you there. Believe me. So you need to have protection. You need to have caution, and you need to write in such a way that when you finally do publish it, it's a done deal, and they come in and raid them or do what they got to do. I can't imagine doing it any other way.
And yeah, once again, while you're there, I'm gonna send out another message. You will find the GoFundMe link on various pages. I'm going to be posting it up again on Issues Today, The Thing Is It, and on my personal wall. Outlaw, if you could send me the link again, I would appreciate it. We're going to put it back out there again because you're quite right, David. We need to get this particular person to safety because it's safe to say that there is more to come from this story. And with some of the stuff that's being withheld in order to protect her right now, this is only going to open up and unravel into something even more different as time transpires. But Outlaw, what interested you in the approach to this arrest that made Anonymous get behind this in the first place?
All right. Well, her friend that she contacted on the phone got in contact with me and told me a little bit about what was going on. And I told her contact to call the jail to figure out where she was, figure out what her bond was, and we can go from there.
Okay.
Well, 3 hours later, that's how long it took to arrive to the jailhouse. It's 3 hours
from the point of being stopped out on the street, right?
Yes, from the point of arrest.
Right. It took 3 hours to get her back to the station.
He was on the phone when they actually told her she was under arrest and put the handcuffs on.
And how far is the station from where they arrested her to where she had to go to?
According to Google Maps, it's with heavy traffic, it shouldn't have taken more than 20 minutes.
Okay,
so,
and we're now talking 3 hours. So not only was she under stress and duress now, anybody that had any contact or knowledge of what she was actually going through would now be worried and concerned also.
Yes, it was basically a desperate plea from her friend to help him make sure that she didn't disappear.
Okay. And that's when, because I got a contact from you and we spoke on this, and you informed me then, had that not taken place, there was a real fear that she would have never reappeared.
Very much so,
okay.
Especially with all the details I found out since.
Okay, so are these people that we're talking about, these officers, so entangled? Is there sufficient evidence to tie them to the crimes that are taking place on the properties that she's referring to that makes people have a real fear as to what could have happened to her on that occasion?
But, can I jump in here?
Yeah,
can I jump in here a second?
Come in, Charlie.
This is what I would say, because I think this is a really important point. First of all, the facts about the arrest itself are troubling. Then the one part of the story we haven't told yet is what happens to her at the jail and the documentation and the even further confusion. And so these lead to some real serious concerns along these lines. But just to go back to something that David had asked, look, we know that the police know that that house next door to hers is a center of numerous illegal activities. And yet what we also know is, despite the complaints made by this individual and others, that operation seems to be going on daily without any interference. But you go a few blocks away, just like as she did when she was driving and then got arrested, the police are arresting individuals, particularly who have actually been to this house, but they're not arresting them at the house. They're not arresting the source of the problem, but they're daily making arrests out of the traffic that comes from this house. So you have to start asking questions. Is there something going on with the police? It certainly looks like there's some sort of connection, and at least in terms of they know it exists. They're choosing for some reason not to take action on the house and the house owner, but they are making arrests of people involved at a distance, separating it from the source. And so the question is, did this particular arresting officer have something to do with this? And what I've heard is that she's heard at least some things that might connect this officer to some of this. Is maybe that's where some of the confidential informants are dealing with. Is this an officially sanctioned approach that's going on by the department, or is it just this one lone rogue officer, or are there a handful of officers involved, or are there a handful of officers involved and a lot of others who know and just remain silent? So all these are questions that this story does raise, and therefore does make it a very big story, especially when you add how odd this arrest is and how odd what happens to her after the arrest is. Because she has been in danger ever since, because she's without her vehicle, without her keys. She can't lock the house door, so they've been tying it. She's without her phone and without her phone with the camera. And she had to walk home, when I pieced together what happened at the jail, nothing made sense until I finally came up with a hypothesis that I'm still working on, and that is the jail washed its hands of this case when they realized how wrong that arrest was. So in the middle of booking her, they started taking her fingerprints, and then all of a sudden another officer calls her over and asks her what happened. And she starts to tell him. And the next thing you know, she's given a document to sign, and then she's brought to the front door, never had her picture taken, never had the fingerprinting fixed, finished, didn't go before a judge for first appearance, but just at midnight is put outside the door in the dark. miles from her home and without her vehicle, never explaining to her what she has to do next, other than she has to appear in court in a month. And the property records, when I looked at them, made no sense because there was no receipt for her property. There was no mention of her vehicle. She does state that when she asked the officer about her phone and her camera phone and all that they were being seized as evidence, but there's no record of any receipt for evidence. In fact, there's no record for anything but a clear plastic bag and a brown paper bag. And so I finally figured out, when I talked to her, what was placed in the clear plastic bag in front of her was her earrings and her bracelet, which she had on. What was placed in the brown paper bag were her shoes. Then the officer who brought her in handed over the dog tags that the other officer had inexplicably removed from her. And then when she got her property out, there's no receipt signing for it ever being given, or no receipt signing for it being taken out, no itemized list, no reference to the keys, no reference to anything. But there is a document that's sort of confusing. It says if your car's been impounded, you have to go to where the station that's been impounded at, but she was never given any explanation as to this. I believe all of those items, more likely than not, are still in the vehicle. And what we need to do is get her vehicle out of the impound, which is going to be costing about $500, which she doesn't have. And that's
part of the reason why we've got the GoFundMe account also,
right,
to try and get her belongings back, as well as trying to get her to some form of safety, right?
And yes, and then we can know, was her camera taken? Did her camera disappear? Is it still in the car? We don't know this yet.
Was there any footage, any evidence of this ongoing research and investigation that she was doing on those cameras or her phone that she had there?
She stated to me that there are certain things on that phone. Both she videotaped part of that interaction of the police arresting her, and there was some prior footage on there as well from what was going on next door. The other interesting thing, by the way, is the police filmed her.
Wow. Okay.
You mean through the vehicle camera?
No, they had their own cell phone camera that they were using.
Well, they filmed themselves arresting her.
Let me ask you, what police department is this? Is this Tampa or Hillsborough Sheriff or County?
This is Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office.
That's listed as the arresting agency, and that's also the agency that ran the jail. Now, there is a question as to whether there was multiple agencies involved in the stop.
Okay, let me ask you, have you looked into the history of Hillsborough County, and have nefarious things been recorded from that sheriff's department in the recent past?
Oh, are you asking me that question?
You've researched.
I'm currently investigating that.
Every county in Florida.
I'm not informed enough to comment on it.
Guys, somebody's talking over each other. We got a lot of voices coming over here. Can we just try and keep this down to one? The question. Can you ask the question again, please, David?
I was cut off, Kervin. I signed back in. I don't know if I should hang up and let you ring me.
Right. So hang on a minute.
Do you hear me all right?
Yeah. Sorry, Charlie's gone off as well.
Yeah. Do you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Oh, did I get cut off?
Yeah, Charlie, you got cut off.
Yeah.
I've just brought you back in again.
Okay. So
what I was saying is,
question.
yes, Hillsborough County has a history, including what I was just saying is that Outlaw just mentioned a name. I think it was Jack Thompson or something like that.
It is Jack Thompson. It is Jack Thompson, the Hillsborough deputy.
He was fired. Well, he left while he was being investigated for inappropriate behavior as a Tampa police officer. A couple years later, he becomes a Hillsborough County sheriff's officer. He lives in the neighborhood. There's been mainstream television media reports recently talking to neighbors who fear for their lives of this guy, with actual video of the guy making threats to people, the sheriff deputy. And they have not done it. And there's numerous, the guy's had like 15 disciplinary hearings, in a short period of time. And all the police representative can say is, but he's just also filled with commendations as well. And so there's no disciplinary action being taken against him, and he's still on the street. And the neighbors are saying, what's going on?
There's an article that goes way back to 2005. And part of that article says, although the sheriff's office has disciplined Thompson for the neighborhood disputes, his file shows he has been at the center of controversy throughout most of his law enforcement career.
Yeah.
That's a clear statement.
What was he involved in this arrest?
Not directly,
Was
as far as I know.
he involved in this?
Not directly.
Not directly. All right. So she went to the jail, county jail. They kept her. They threw her out on the street. They didn't give her evidence. She's got to pay $500 to get her car. And does she have an attorney?
No, she hasn't even. Normally, when you're arrested, you go before a judge for first appearance, and there's several things happen there. One of the things that happens there is the judge determines whether there was probable cause. The judge sets reasonable bond, and the judge asks you if you need the appointment of the public defender. So she's only been given this notice to appear. It doesn't say what it's for. But it'll be the first time she goes before a judge, and it'll be the first time she has the opportunity to get the public defender. But she doesn't know or have the resources to get a private attorney at this time.
Okay.
Because honestly, I believe that a properly worded motion to dismiss that there was no probable cause for this arrest should put an end to the judicial part of this.
So where is she now? At her home?
She's stuck in her. Yeah. By the way, she had to walk at midnight 10 miles to her home, through these neighborhoods when she was released from the jail.
How old is this woman?
She's 41.
41. My God.
And she's been living there without her keys because she didn't know where they were. They never told her. In fact, they told her those things were being seized as evidence and wouldn't be given back to her. But
one thing that's very important that she didn't realize how bad things were with the booking process was she's never been arrested before.
Right.
Not once. And when we found out that they failed to take all fingerprints and they didn't take her photo, it leads us to question all kinds of things as to whether the jailhouse decided to wipe their hands of the case and just release her. Maybe they have something more nefarious planned. Maybe it was all a distraction to get her out of her house so they could see what evidence that she had collected in her house. I mean, that could be the reason they didn't return the keys. We don't know until we get her property returned to her and we get proper evidence and the police reports of what they said they did.
Yes,
and we can't do that.
And on top of that all, she's in fear of actually leaving her property because they still have access to her house if they've got her keys. So
right, and she can't call anybody because her phone is gone. She can't record what's going on around her like she was able to do because her phone with the camera's gone. She can't get in her car and flee, or let alone move, because she's without a vehicle. They can't even properly lock the doors. They have to tie a rope around the doors to keep it locked.
And funnily enough,
she's got real reason to be afraid.
Coincidentally, the criminal activity next door goes on as usual.
Actually,
including the threat to cut off her head.
Yeah.
Outlaw.
It's actually activities next door.
Yeah, the activities next door. And also...
The activity next door has...
it continues. Documented on... Me? Yeah, I can hear you. Hi, Outlaw?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. You're kind of... I'm not sure how many conversations you're having at the minute. I think David was asking you a question.
Do you have any idea who these drug dealers are? I mean, this meth people are. Is it just a local family, or do you think they're an agency of a bigger cartel, so to speak? Do you have any evidence whatsoever? Has anyone monitored the house to see?
We know exactly who the dealer is from the house, and we know exactly we know the relationship that the dealer has with the police.
Okay, then why hasn't this been published, or what's the deal here? What, Charlie?
backtracking to do to get the paper proof to include with the video evidence as in the logs that she has. We also want the paper proof and the paper trail. So police
I'm
are
sorry,
involved.
I didn't understand.
with
Why?
this
I don't
person
understand.
Right,
Sorry,
so all of this is going to be backed up with evidence and information and continued research in order to be able to secure a proper investigation into what's going on at that particular place.
Okay, so she's gonna go to court, and she doesn't have an attorney. She has to
At this
appear
point, no.
She appears at court. They're going to ask her if she wants an attorney, right? Has she got a prosecutor? Has anyone a district attorney?
No. Nobody's spoken with the state attorney's office at this point.
Well,
And it's unlikely the state attorney will speak to anybody but an attorney.
well, if she claims to represent herself, they have to speak. Well, I don't know.
I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear. I hear something in the background, so I couldn't hear what you just asked.
Yeah, I'm hearing some children in the background.
No, it's all clear. It should be all clear now.
So,
Okay.
Guys?
The police abused,
David,
her property stolen. What?
Yeah, do you want to run that again, David? Your signal went there for a minute.
Oh, okay. I said, so now we have a situation. A woman, 41 years old, is stopped on a back road at night. She's surrounded by numerous men and a woman, armed, filming her, demanding she gets off of 9/11. It's almost like an alien world. You know, you have a Martian descend on you in the middle of the night, and you don't know what to do. And these big people are ordering you around. They arrest you. They take your car. They take your property. They take you to the jail, and they throw you out, and they give you no means to return home. It seems to me that this is a very good story that should have a lot of interest. What are you guys doing to get it out beyond us? Is there an article in the Tampa newspaper, the St. Petersburg Times, Outlaw? Have you put it on any of your sites? Have we targeted any of those 4 police responsible for doing this to that woman? Has anyone monitored the house? Are there photographs of individual police meeting with them? What's happening?
All of the above.
All the above. And so where do we go from here? Is our goal here just to help her get the funds to fight this, or is there some broader message?
Our goal here, David, is to help her get the funds to fight this, and B, for us to document this through this story. What we're doing here tonight is exposing what's taking place there publicly. We're standing in that gap for her.
So I'm a listener.
And from this, we can build pressure to try local other journalists to take a look.
Yeah, good.
And there are some other big name journalists that are looking to get involved already. But it's creating that awareness. It's creating that awareness, making people aware of what's taking place. And don't forget, this is a journalistic right. There are journalists all across the world that could be subjected to this type of pressure and victimization based on trying to uncover the truth. And what we have here is we're not just talking about of wrongdoing. We're talking about deep-rooted corruption. Deep-rooted corruption. Unsolved murder. We're talking about, and if anybody had that much traffic going through their house, their street, it would be quite evident what was taking place. And the fact that there are frequent visitations from that particular sheriff's office, so that they are aware of some of the movements that are taking place at that particular location, and still do nothing to intervene in any way, shape or form to protect and defend the other neighbors in that neighborhood who have to live in that environment, then that stinks of corruption.
Yeah, and there, people have to remember there's 2 types of corruption, and they can feed off of each other in a cyclical fashion and in a feedback mechanism. There's benign is not the right word, but there's a less morally corrupt form of corruption, and that's systemic corruption. It's like a hard drive that goes bad. It's corrupted. We don't have a problem using the word of a corrupted hard drive. We know what that means. The mechanism itself is such that if we put it to its normal use, it produces a distorted outcome. And that tends to lead other people inside the department who mean well to act corruptly as well, meaning they're not aiming at the proper end of the police. Add to that individuals who are morally corrupt, but the police have always been a haven for people to be of that nature to go into, and they shouldn't be at all, but especially in the South. You got to remember, it was in the South that the police were, the Klan, and especially in Florida. And for years during the civil rights or pre-civil rights era, they were the ones not only sanctioning and turning the other eye, but often providing the guns or pulling the trigger themselves. So, and that's not that long ago. That's in my lifetime, and these things don't just change overnight.
We had a similar. We had a similar.
You have the option added by individuals.
We had a similar situation here in the UK about 20 odd years ago. It was a ghetto area. It was a police no-go area, and it was a front line where a lot of criminal activity took place. The proceeds of robberies were held, and drugs were constantly being sold on every corner. There was £30,000 per month being paid to particular officers in order for that particular place to be warned before the police came in so they can clean up their act when a raid was going to take place. Police never came onto that street and never arrested anybody, the dealers or users. But when you were leaving All Saints Road in Ladbroke Grove and you made your way towards the main road, which was about 3 to 4 minutes away, there was bodies of police waiting to stop you, search you and charge you with possession. Right, but they never came into that community. And then later on, they then tried to shut this man down, and he actually got a £3 million compensation because he had actually recorded the Scotland Yard officers who were continually bribing him, taking bribes, taking money from him, and those that were giving him the information when the police were coming in order for them to be able to maintain this standard of living that they were getting from him. And he produced all the recordings in court, and even though he was responsible for a lot of wrongdoing or allowing it, permitting it to take place, he was actually awarded over £3 million in this country. So recording stuff is a journalist's right at the very least, and to have that taken away from her so that A, she doesn't have her evidence, and B, she's not able to do the job of which she actually earns her living from. What the police have actually done there is not just try to shut her up, they've actually tried to put her out of business. Now, that cannot be stood for. We cannot stand by and let that happen. If that was to happen to one single person, imagine what the message that sends out to everybody else out there. And again, as the stories have already shown, that these police are alleged to have killed 2 other individuals in order to shut them up and teach others a lesson not to interfere. So we cannot let this go untold. We cannot let this go untouched. And we've got to stand and put this story, present it in the best way that we possibly can, exposing the deep-rooted corruption that lies behind the arrest of this journalist individual that we're now speaking of. And Outlaw, I'm quite sure that there's another area that you want to take this into, because that particular individual that lives next door, I believe, is also a paid informant that the handler was involved in the arrest of this particular activist.
Actually, it was a couple of nights ago. The journalist she was out there and she was trying to see what was going on because there was a lot of traffic and it was noisy, and she saw somebody that she recognized that has been friendly towards her, and she found out that Mr. Gerald Dixon, the guy who runs the house next door, his handler was the big woman who was especially aggressive towards her during her arrest. And after she got home, the very next day, Mr. Gerald Dixon was bragging that he had gotten her truck taken away and he had the cops do it. And so that's something that we're looking into to verify if he was just bragging or if that's an actual statement. an actual confession.
Wow. That in itself, scary enough. And the bottom line is, Mr. Dixon himself is a user of the very same drugs he sells, right?
Yes, I wouldn't hesitate to say that. I wouldn't hesitate to say that he probably partakes in the prostitution ring that he runs. One of the documented cases that this journalist has, one of the prostitutes, Mr. Dixon got addicted to meth so that he could control her, was actually underage when she started. I believe she was 15 when she started.
Are you there, David?
Yeah.
How is this unfolding for you now?
Well, it's a very serious crime in the United States to corrupt the youth in that way, to get one addicted, to sell to youth, to have sex with youth. And if he's selling drugs to somebody that age and using her to pimp drugs, you know, the other porno movies, prostitution, I'm not saying she's doing it, but that's the next thing up the alley. And it seems to me that this house exists. This reporter has evidence. Outlaw and Charlie seem to know a lot about it. It seems to me that that's a perfect operation for a very big story. And I would like to be able to say that World Jam Radio, because it would be to clean up the environment that is bringing about a great amount of evil and harm to a lot of people. And if it has truly corrupted the county police department, I think that we are in a very serious situation that is far more dangerous for the community than we realized before.
Some of the things that we're actually hearing about here on this particular story are the type of things that you'd actually see on some kind of fictional TV movie where the cops were fighting with gangsters and villains, where the police were corrupt. The type of thing that you'd actually see in a blockbuster. Because for me, when you're talking about bodies going missing, unaccounted for, with no accountability whatsoever, no questions being asked, and the fact that the bodies were found on the property of a police officer who was actually alleged to be involved in the killing, and it's still not being challenged, that something smells rotten. Absolutely rotten. And so that corruption has got to go to the very core of that police force. You would almost imagine everybody in there is in on it. So what do we do as a people? What are we supposed to do in order to defend our freedom of speech, our basic human rights, and our right to live in peace in our own neighborhoods? Because that's apparently what she did. She saw something going on that she didn't like. She started to document and record it. She began to complain and obviously ruffle some feathers. So, David, you asked that question at the very beginning. Did she go and tell anybody? Yes, she did. She went and reported it, as she thought was the right thing to do. But it turns out that the people that she was reporting it to are the very people that are permitting it to take place. Is that correct, Charlie?
I absolutely. And that's what sends up the red flag most immediately. They could shut this house down, but they seem to be tacitly turning a semi-blind eye. Not that they're not making arrests from the house, which actually gives you an idea that they could be using this just as they know it's there. They know they can make often, a bust here, a bust there, a bust there, and keep making continuous busts by place going. And often when you have a relationship, there's an informal relationship or even a formal relationship between an officer and what they call confidential informant. The confidential informant is often allowed to commit crimes in order to produce further arrests of other people, and often they're aided in committing the crimes. I mean, this is not something you just see on a TV movie. I mean, this is the reality of how police operate these days. They play very loose and fast with the law.
we've talked about activism over the last few weeks, and what levels it's now moved to. And when you look at activism back in the '60s, Black Power movement, etc., when you look back to how the Martin Luther King movement and everything else started off with Malcolm X and everything else, activism is in such a different level now. The playing field has been leveled off, because of the internet, and the ability for people to now share information on a much wider scale than ever before. But then that also ups the ante from the police's front, because they're now going to have to go deeper into corruption in order to protect the very way they're living. But for me, when you put on that uniform, when you align yourself with law enforcement or the police or whatever you call it in whatever country you come from, you're taking up an allegiance to that country's constitutional rights to protect and serve, and that with that comes great responsibility. People are relying on you and counting on you to protect their communities, especially for the future of the next generation, which will be our children. Now, what you can quite evidently see coming out of this, just from this story alone, is a deep-rooted network of corrupt officers that are scratching each other's backs, rubbing each other's backs, and rubbing their hands in glee as they count the money that comes through the organized crime that they're allowing to take place from the residence of Mr. Dixon, which is what our journalists and we as a whole will obviously endeavor to shut down. Now, Outlaw, where do you see us going from here? What do you see the next step to be?
Well, the next step is to get irrefutable proof on paper that there is a connection between certain police officers that have been reported to work with the house next door and that house, whether it be phone logs, internet connection, backtrack paper. We'll find it. If it exists on paper, if it exists digitally, we will find that, and we will give that to the people. We will give that to the journalists who are covering this, so that their crimes can be exposed, so that they will have someone out there will prosecute. They will have to face the crime.
How confident?
Well, let me say this. I find it amazing that the sheriff, I just looked it up, the sheriff of Hillsborough County is a David G. No relation to me, David. He manages the 10th largest enforcement agency in America with a $370 million annual budget. You hear that, Kervin?
I can hear that.
Kervin.
I can hear that.
$370 million a year is his budget. This guy is a graduate of University of Tampa. But what I notice here is with all of his, he came up through that department. He's a long 35-year veteran of the Tampa and the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. And it seems to me that no matter what your credentials are, and I'm not questioning his personal integrity, but it seems to me when you are dealing with $370 million, a massive law enforcement agency, you don't want your name really brought in the mud. And it seems to me that somebody would bring to his attention, this is going on, like put in the local newspaper, why doesn't David G. do something about this meth house? Why doesn't David G. take care of this prostitution house? I'm hearing a lot of static and a lot of noise.
There is a lot of noise. But let me just say this before anybody answers that. I sent out a request to Larry McKinnon, who is the PR officer for Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. I got a message back from him when I started following him on Twitter, and it said, "Hello, my Twitter friend. I'm so glad that you followed me," and etc. I then sent him an invite to take part on this show to either refute, challenge, question, or put across their side of events. And suffice to say, I've had no response to my invite, and no response to the allegation that I sent to him on the purpose of this show, which was to uncover the police corruption, brutality, and abuse of law enforcement order in this particular case. And I sent him a direct message explaining to him what we were going to be doing on his show, and it's been over a week. I've not heard back from him. So they had an opportunity to defend this.
I think he works for a woman called Debbie Carter. Why don't you write to Debbie Carter and ask her?
Well, I would imagine that we're about to take this on to any level that it will go to.
She is the chief public information officer for the whole area, for Hillsborough, Tampa, everything over there. And Detective Larry McKinnon works for Debbie Carter. So I'd contact her and say, look, your deputy's not responding to me. We want an answer on this. And if you don't give us an answer, we're going to ask Sheriff G on the front page of the Tampa newspaper. I know one thing about working for a president of the United States. The last thing an elected official wants is to have his name brought up about a matter of which he has not been informed. It's called the surprise effect. And if they find out that you have tried to reach them over and over again, and then it becomes public, they tear up their departments and they bend over backward to placate the people who bring it to their attention, ultimately because they feel sideswiped. So, Charlie, you're down there in Tampa. What can you do to bring publicity and put the pressure on Sheriff G? Ask Sheriff G, why do you kidnap women and throw them out in the middle of the night of your jail? Without a car, without safety, without protection. Are you listening, Charlie?
Yeah. Well, what I'm trying to do in the ways that I can help, and there are certain things that I can do to help. But one of the things I know of is it's very hard in America to get real stories reported. Local news is not really very good, and national news doesn't pay attention to local news until it gets on a national stage. So I'm trying to find out who good contact people are. Now, Tampa does have a advantage. It has two very good newspapers that often do investigative journalism. It's just getting the right person to listen to the story long enough and close enough to see that they can pick it up. It's also about, one thing I've learned about journalists, even the good ones, and there's not a lot of good ones out there, though, you have to write the story for them. So that's, one of the things I would ask is, what can we do and what must we do? Well, one of the things we have to do, and particularly using this internet tool that we have that they didn't have in the 60s and the 70s, the last sort of era of citizen activism, and it is an incredible tool. But what we have to do is we have to use that power and that potential to both tell the story, write the story for the journalists, and put the pressure on the journalists to begin reporting. I just want to add one more thing to what do we need to do, because there's another glaring thing that we don't have that was around in the 60s and 70s that we are in desperate need of. In the 60s and 70s, there was a class of lawyers out there who were true civil rights attorneys. And they went and they took the cases because they needed to be taken. It is almost impossible, particularly in a state like Florida, to find an attorney when you get in trouble like this, whether it be something as almost innocuous as a charge of misuse of 911 or the much more common, batteries on law enforcement officers and all that. The people who are doing these things and are being targeted by the police with false charges, we need to nurture, develop, recruit, and organize a team and a network of lawyers around the globe to be there to help whenever someone falls into this position. Because without a lawyer, you're really almost helpless in this system unless you really know what you're doing and you really have the courage to stand up and speak. And it's not easy to do.
It's this in itself, take it wherever you like to take it, taking it back to the fear. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this story on Bernard Scott. Have any of you heard the story of Bernard Scott? Okay. Police in St. Louis recently arrested a man on a minor traffic violation and then blocked paramedics who said that he needed to be taken to the hospital. Paramedics from Northeast Fire Protection District say that they went to the Pine Law Jail in September on a call to check on an inmate who had abdominal pain and bleeding. He explained that he needed to go to the emergency room, but the police officers and deputies working in the jail refused to listen to him. Now, let me just say this. This guy then went on. He apparently supposedly died, and the police recorded that he had committed suicide in the jail. But here's the biggest breakthrough. He didn't die. He survived. He survived. And he came out, and he's now saying, why would I commit suicide over $360 worth of fines? It was a minor traffic violation. The paramedics have come out in support, and we're still waiting to hear the outcome. Now, when you're hearing about things like that taking place, no matter what part of the state it might be, surely that gives the general public a genuine reason to be in fear of the very people that are paid to protect and serve. So therefore, any issue regarding calling 911, this abuse of 911 or misuse of 911 cannot be substantiated based on the sheer fear and terror that you guys must be going through in the United States. We don't get that here in the UK. So unfortunately, as much as I can sympathize, I don't empathize, only because we don't experience that here. I stand back in horror when I hear these stories, when I read these stories, when I see these evidences. And here's the biggest joke of all. Majority of people here in the UK don't get it because we don't get this news reported to us. I get this because people send it to me.
Well, I can reinforce that.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I lived 4 years in London.
Hang on a minute, David. Go ahead, Charlie.
Okay.
I lived 4 years in London, and I almost never saw police. Certainly never saw them driving around everywhere. Oh, when I did see them, they were walking the beat without a gun. I never felt in fear. I never felt nervous. They were very friendly. They were very, And then one day I saw when the red units came out with guns. They came out of there and they surrounded a place and they came in and did the business and they were gone. And that was the only thing I ever. Never once did I fear the police. Never once did I feel their overwhelming presence. But when I walked back into America, they're everywhere you turn. And they're looking at you, no matter who you are, as a potential suspect.
And they're
you certainly don't see them walking the beat. They're all in their cars, and they're everywhere.
And they're weaponized. They're carrying huge weapons.
Massive weapons.
We had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, Charlie, where me and David was talking about. I think we had Alex Salazar on the show as well, and we were talking about.
Okay, now I want to get back to the issue of what we can do and what our listeners can do. Now, we don't know this woman's name, do we? We've never said it on the radio.
We do, but we're not going to. We're not going to divulge it on.
So, I have done some research here. I can what you call multitask.
Go ahead.
And not well.
You the man. You the man.
But I think the Tampa newspaper has a man named Danielson. Now, he covers City Hall, politics, and police department. Very political, and I just scanned about 10 articles he's written about crime and police in Tampa and Hillsborough County. He has a Twitter account as well. So, and I've got his picture. So I'm going to put his picture, and I have over 12,500 followers on my Twitter. And I'm going to put his picture on my Twitter account with his Twitter attention, and encourage all of my 12,500 people to write him and ask him why this sheriff is doing what he's doing and there's no accountability. But I need to know how to formulate the demand in a specific way that brings attention to it so that he can find out without knowing her name, since we're not going to reveal it. So how can my people help?
Right, well, I'm going to ask you to communicate that with Charlie in private after our show. And the name it's not an issue about the name. Our concern at the moment is because there is actions looking to be taken, we don't want them to be able to get a jump on her. right?
But if I put it on my Twitter, they're going to get it.
They're going to get it. But the bottom line is that might also act as a safeguard because of where it's coming from.
I say this: if you have cockroaches in your kitchen, turn on the lights.
There you go. There's no way for them to hide. All right. So again, I say, speak with Charlie. Charlie is in direct communication with her. Outlaw is totally aware of the trauma and stress that she's going through right now.
Okay, you guys both know my Twitter, and you can IM me personally, or you can email me at my email, which you well know. So it's no problem for you to do that, and I'll do all I can on behalf. And 12,500 men in my Twitter is the equivalent of an army division. So
absolutely.
We'll make an attack on those unjust people. And this guy Danielson, Charlie, do you know who he is, Outlaw and Charlie? The reporter named Danielson?
Not yet.
Okay. I don't know him.
Well, look him up on the Tampa Bay News. Look under Search Danielson, Danielson, and you'll find him. He looks like a very nice chap. He's about 55 years old, and I think he might be interested in a story because he's a very political person. And ultimately, the only way we control the police is by money and politics.
Amen.
Yep.
Amen.
And I think you're right. If we can find someone like him and have people from around the world tweeting him, hey, there's a story, look at it, and we can get to him further information. Maybe that'll be what will spark them to actually pick up a pen and a paper and do a little bit of writing on it.
As a journalist, I can tell you my experience has always been when people ask me questions, I'm far more interested than when they tell me facts because I'm going to have to verify their facts anyway. So if you come to me and say, this woman was arrested in the night and released and blah, 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 that's one thing. But if you come to me and say, why do you think 4 policemen surrounded a woman who complained about meth addicts and prostitution near her house? Why do you think 4 police arrested her and made her get off a 911 call, put her in jail, and then released her, hoping something would happen to her on the way home as she had to go 10 miles without a car? Why do you think that happened? Now he's got a deal. He's got a fish in the water.
He's got something to bite.
I should throw him nobody's interested. Listen, I live on the ocean. If I walk the ocean, I see a dead fish, I walk around it and I don't look at it. But if you tell me there's a 10-pound fish in the ocean, I can catch it, I'm going to run home and get my fishing pole. You follow me?
Absolutely. Now, listen, we don't want to. I don't want to. I believe we're going to be coming back to this story again. But I did, me and Outlaw had a conversation before the show started, and there was something that we wanted to. He wanted to bring into this show just towards the close, and we needed to give it enough time so that we could actually present it in here as well as part of the show that we're doing. Just before we end, I also would like Charlie to just sum up the emotions that our particular journalist activist suffered after the way that she was treated, and how this is actually having a recurring effect on her, even as we speak, to the extent where she was unable, even though she wanted to initially, to attend and be part of this show because of how it had her feeling. But Outlaw, you wanted to talk about some different agendas that the police might have had, not this particular police force in particular. But we were talking about the legalization to use weaponized drones, etc., on our citizens, and how they were looking to demonize Black Lives Matter. So I'm going to hand it over to you and let you throw that in there, and we will contribute.
Actually, before the words were ever uttered on Fox News about a war on cops, a couple of days before that, one of the states here, I have to look up and figure out which one, they legalized weaponized drones to be used on citizens by the police. And then, I don't know about you, but that sounds a little bit more like a military operation than it does a police operation.
Absolutely.
So how do you justify that? Well, there's a war on cops. That's how you justify that. There's no war on cops.
Yeah.
Well, how do you prove that there's a war on cops? Well, this person who said they support Black Lives Matter took an action against a police officer over here. But he said he supported Black Lives Matter. He didn't say he was an active member or part of the movement or anything like that. And they blow everything way out of proportion so that they can justify whatever they want to do. And they've been doing that forever. And we the people, have blindly accepted it, saying that it's necessary because we throw that word in there, that war, so it's necessary.
What impact will those drones have on that particular state? That's just give us an idea of what these drones are capable of doing.
Just imagine going to a protest. You're standing there holding a sign peacefully. You might be doing a chant. You guys are walking back and forth in a circle. You're not impeding traffic or anything like that. And the police officers there decide they don't want to deal with you because they're afraid that the crowd might turn violent or become riot-like Baltimore or Ferguson was. And so instead they release drones, and they have the drones come out and they pepper spray the crowd, or they tase certain individuals who are loud and starting to get people to rally even more, to take people out, to bring people down and to beat them into submission without even ever actually having to show their faces.
Does that not just bring about less accountability?
A lot, because on top of that, then if there is a mishap and say somebody dies, they can just blame faulty machinery.
Absolutely. So that it takes away accountability. So somebody else sitting somewhere else can make the decision to send the drones in. The drones malfunction, kills 20, 30 people, and it's a really bad thing. It really shouldn't have happened, and we're really so sorry for it. But unfortunately, it was the drones' fault.
Exactly.
What else could they use the drones for?
Spying, following protesters back to their houses to figure out where they live, to figure out who they are. Let's say you're an anon or you're supporting Anonymous and you're wearing a mask during the Million Mask March. When you leave and go home, they have the drone follow you. You get out, you take your mask off, you go inside. They got your address. They know where you are. Now they can harass you at your workplace, etc., and get you fired from your work, make it uncomfortable for you to live where you live, and ultimately force you to either have to move or file injunctions, which never go anywhere. And you raise enough of a stink that all of a sudden there's a drone accident at your next protest.
Some people might say, plain devil's advocates, that those who are doing nothing illegal or who are doing nothing wrong should have nothing to fear. Would you agree with that?
No. You have everything to fear. They're manufacturing criminals, okay? The private prison industry sues the states for not keeping their prisons full. So what they have to do is they have to make up charges. They can arrest you, and we have millions of laws and nobody knows about it. It's not like everybody sits there and memorizes every law because there's millions of them. We're at the point now they can arrest you and then figure something to charge you with. Some obscure law somewhere.
Yeah, and let me add to what Anonymous is saying. These counties go into debt, and cities and states go into debt to build prisons that are far more elaborate and more expensive than university campuses or high schools are. And then they've got to fill the beds with heads, and they've got to put them in. So the corrupt system puts people in prison for long terms so that they have the money to pay the debt to the private owners of those prisons. And it's not only the building facility, but it includes the electric company, the heating company, the gas suppliers, the food suppliers, the commissaries, the food, the clothes, the laundry. All is a whole massive prison industrial complex dependent upon this new industry in America, which we call the Gulag system in Russia. But that's what it is.
Wow.
And people don't realize that the biggest industry in the state of Florida, in particular, is prisons, especially North Florida. I mean, but it is the biggest. It is the biggest employer. It is the biggest private contractor. It's huge. It outpaces education spending since the '90s. It overtook that. It's bigger than the tourism industry. I mean, Florida generates a huge amount of money through prisons.
Wow.
And not only that, but we have a situation, Kervin, in the United States where some states, like Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, they actually build prisons so that they take prisoners from other states and locales as kind of guests. And then those states who don't want to invest in the prison system pay these poorer states who do to keep their prisoners. It's disgusting.
I'm absolutely speechless from most of what I hear. But we are also going through a stage here in the UK where we are privatizing quite a lot of our prisons, and based on what I'm hearing as what's taking place in America right now, it sounds like a very frightening experience for us to look ahead to if that's where we're going. But at the minute, what we do have is we have a pretty young 41-year-old who has been absolutely traumatized by her recent experience, having never been in trouble with the law before. And her very first experience in being stopped by the police has actually left her in an absolutely desperate place. Can we emphasize any more how difficult things are for her, Charlie, at this precise moment in time?
Oh no! I mean, she is, and reasonably so. She is just absolutely terrified right now and confused and not knowing what to do or how to do it. I mean, this is a young woman who is a very, very accident that traumatic accident that nearly took her life. Crushed a large part of her body. She had to recuperate from that. She's living in fear of her life every day from activities going on the door, and they've even had someone attack her from that house. She has had the courage, what many people don't do, but people are starting to learn to do, which is to stand up and make phone calls, make complaints, and even then go the further step is when nothing's being done to become a citizen journalist and activist about it. And then she's met, instead of with help, she's met with the force of law, the abuse of the force of law, coming down on her arbitrarily, traumatizing her even further, for someone who's never been arrested. And that's the other thing. I mean, police in the jails, they just assume it's a bad person. There's probably been here before, knows what to do and knows what to expect, but the average person doesn't. So this woman is justifiably terrified.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this show. It's been an absolutely enthralling 2 hours, along with Dr. David Outlaw and Charlie Grabsky. I'd like to thank each and every single one of you for joining us tonight, and remind everybody that a GoFundMe will be posted all over the place. You can find it on Anonymous. You will be able to find it on Charlie Grabsky. You'll be able to find it on my wall sometime after this show, because Outlaw's going to send it all back out to us. I know it's on my wall somewhere already. I'll find it and reshare it again. But we're desperately trying to have this her goods returned to her. We're trying to have her put into a safe place where she's not going to go missing like the two previous bodies that were found on the ranch of this particular peculiar police officer. And with the help of not just Dr. David Rumey, but every single one of us who has a duty to do something right in our time. Our legacy cannot just be we born and we die and everything in between is meaningless. Here's an opportunity to do something right. Stand for something that you believe in. Stand for what is right, and stand for the basic human rights and the freedom of speech of not just journalists, but ourselves and each other, that where the truth be told, that we can feel free to tell it. I want to thank you guys again for being with me tonight. And Outlaw, I'm going to leave the last word with you. What's your call to the people around the world? Hi, Outlaw.
If you see something, say something. And if you don't get anywhere, We'll say it for you. We'll say it louder. We will help. You're not
Absolutely.
alone.
Okay. Remember that.
And part of that is making sure others aren't alone as well.
Absolutely. Remember that. You are not alone. David, once again, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We are completely out of time tonight. I was going to try and play another track, but I'm not going to have any time whatsoever. We've got about 30 seconds left. Charlie, last words on our activist behalf.
Yes, I would just say keep spreading the word and put out the call. We need to recruit and develop a network of lawyers.
Thank you very much, guys. It's been an absolutely amazing 2 hours.
I have one word.
Go on, David.
One word: courage, courage, courage.
Absolutely. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much. We're out of here.